What's up, guys? It's Mike with Insatiable Thirst. I'm back with a much overdue episode of Insatiable Thirsty Thursday. Today we're going to cover a style of beer that we already have once, so I won't go into too much detail about the BJCP category number or any history of the beer. We're talking about Saison, the difference being it's my homebrewed Saison. I brewed this beer with Nelson Sauvin, which is a hop from Nelson, New Zealand. This hop is known to give a white wine and kiwi like aroma and flavor characteristics. Speaking of aroma, let's dig into it. So one thing I noticed off bat, and I've noticed this in other samples of this beer, is there's a touch of a buttery aroma, which is not a good aroma. That's a diacetyl formation. But moving on to that, I'll touch back on that later. I definitely get the white wine and a vaguely fruity, sweet smell that could be coming from both the hop and the yeast. This being a Belgian ale yeast, it does produce bold, fruity esters, as well as some spice characteristics. And those are present as well. I'd probably call it kind of clove and or coriander on the aroma. So we've talked about the aroma, and I'm going to get back into the diacetyl in a bit. Let's look at the color. I think I nailed the color on this. Saisons are usually that kind of golden, light orange color, and when I poured it, there was a bit more of a head than is present now. So there's another thing I need to work on with my recipe formulation, is boosting my head retention. But digging into the flavor, certainly it's dry and crisp. I'm not left with sweetness on the palate, but there is a fruity and light crackery malt character. The bitterness is really subdued and mellow, with kiwi being kind of the forefront of the hop character in my opinion, but that could be because I expected it. Moving on to the mouthfeel. It is a crisp and dry, not drying, but it leaves the palate pretty quickly, other than a slight slickness that came from, again, we're talking about diacetyl. So we talked about the aroma, we talked about the appearance, the flavor, and now the mouthfeel. Now I'm going to dig a little bit back into diacetyl and how I think that happened and what I will do to correct that in the future. Diacetyl is a natural byproduct of yeast. But if you have enough healthy yeast and the correct temperature during your fermentation, near the end of the fermentation, the yeast will go back up and clean up the diacetyl, and that's called a diacetyl rest. In this case, I was out of town for a little over a week during the end of the fermentation here, and I didn't have the temperature exactly where I wanted it, which is in the low to mid 70s is a good temperature for a diacetyl rest. I was out of town, like I said, and the temperature probably dropped down into the mid 60s, which is a little low and slowed things down. But when I came back, I was eager to get the beer kegged. I probably could have boosted the temperature a little bit and aided in that diacetyl rest, but I didn't. Lo and behold, I have a little bit of diacetyl in my Saison. Another thing that I could have done to help with that would be to make a yeast starter. I'm a little embarrassed to say that as a homebrewer of 3 years, I've never made a starter. That's going to change. Look back at my blog in the next week, and I will have a how-to make a starter. I'm going to teach myself, and in doing so, I'll teach you. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about diacetyl production and how to avoid it on that blog post. But as per usual, it's been a pleasure. Cheers.